I had a message today from Matthew who was asking me what it was really like to live in Mallorca. And that got me thinking, because lots of people have asked me about why we're here, how did we arrive in Mallorca. And so I thought I'd just give you a little idea about how we came to be in Mallorca. And then maybe in a future video we'll go down the road and talk about lots of other things about living here in Mallorca. Now, we started thinking about coming to Mallorca more than 35 years ago. In 1984 we had our first child, Lara, and that was 1984, and the winter of 1984-85 was a rather cool winter, and that got us thinking. So during that winter time, Anita was on her maternity leave. We were looking at places where we could go to all over the world, and one of them was Mallorca. We were both teachers. We both taught in comprehensive schools in Stoke-on-Trent, and we were not really happy with what we were doing or the progress or the future that we had there. So why not look somewhere else? So we typed up our curriculum vitae, we sent them all off to all sorts of different places, and one day Anita called me and said, we've had a phone call from Mallorca. They want to call back later on this evening and talk about the job. So I got home and took this call, and the lady, who was the principal of the school at the time, asked me a few questions and then offered me the job over the telephone. I'd never been to Mallorca. I didn't even possess a passport at that time, and I was a little bit uncertain about the big move, and I said, well, before I accept the job, I would like to go and see the school. This was May time, and I arranged to go at the bank holiday weekend at the end of May in 1985. And I suppose I should have known, I didn't really know, I was very naive at the time, that it was a really expensive time, and it cost a fortune for the flight to get over to Mallorca to visit the school. The school paid half of it, and they agreed to do that. It was £270. So if you think of £270 in 1985, that was quite a lot of money just for a return flight. No holiday, just a return flight. Anyway, I got to Mallorca and I was met at the airport and had a look around the school, had a look around the area, and I phoned Anita up from Mallorca and said, yeah, we're going to move to Mallorca, we're going to sell the house, sell the car, get rid of everything and move over to Mallorca. So this was the end of May in 1985, and that's exactly what we did. As soon as I got back to England, I went to the headmaster and handed in my resignation. Teachers have to hand their resignation in, or they did at that time, at the end of May, if they were not returning in September. So I did that, and between the end of May, so June to we arriving in Mallorca at the end of August, we managed to sell our house, sell our car, sell everything we'd got, or put it all in storage, and move to Mallorca. I said that I didn't even possess a passport, so actually to go for that weekend I had to get what you could get then was like a temporary passport. You just went to the post office and you could get a temporary passport which allowed you to travel. The principal of the school was amazed that I hadn't got a passport. Anyway, that was one of the things that needed to be sorted out before we could move to Mallorca. So that was sorted out. Another thing that we had to do then, because at that time Spain was not part of the EEC or the European Community, I'm not sure what it was called then, we had to have a visa. If you wanted to stay in Mallorca for any length of time, you had to have a visa from the Spanish embassy. I can't remember the way we went about that, but it can't have been too complicated, and we managed to get our visa. When you arrive in Spain, you have to get your passport stamped. That's all part of the visa. We did have a farewell party at Anita's parents' house, and it was one of the most emotional farewell parties I have ever been to or ever had, particularly as far as my grandparents were concerned. I think it was then that it dawned on me that we were actually making this big move. and that we would be a long way away, and it wouldn't be just a drive down the road to get home. And it was quite tearful, particularly thinking of my grandparents, that what if something happened to them? I might not be able to see them again. It wasn't to be. I did actually see them again, and it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, but it was an emotional event. So at the end of August we booked our flight. It was a return flight. In those days you could book flight only with tour companies, and they sort of gave you a hotel, but you weren't intending to stay in the hotel. And so we did actually have a flight to return. If all things went wrong in the first few days, we would go back on the flight. Anyway, it didn't. Other things we needed to think about, driving. So we organised to have international driving licenses. Insurance, we had holiday insurance because we didn't really know what to expect. And we packed our bags. So we arrived in Mallorca at the end of August with 2 suitcases, pushchair and a baby. When we got to the airport, it was incredibly hot. End of August, you can imagine how hot it was. We got in a taxi, and with what tiny little bit of Spanish we had at the time, we directed the taxi driver to the school, where we were met by the bursar and the principal, and we were actually shown to an apartment. The school owned an apartment which they had available to teachers, so we didn't have the issue of finding a property. The property was already here. It was a 1-bedroom apartment. It was tiny, but it got fantastic views and a swimming pool, and it was great for us. We actually only stayed there for 2 or 3 months, but it was a great place to start while we were looking for somewhere that we could live in for longer term. So we'd settled into this little apartment, and I started my job more or less the next day or within the next few days. And the first few weeks, I suppose, were settling in periods. For me, I was working, so it was really just get on with the job. That was not really too much of an issue. For Anita, it might have been a little bit more complicated because we had a baby, and babies need things, and we were not able to find them. So we were used to using Pampers nappies, for example, in England, and we didn't have Pampers nappies here in Mallorca. We were used to different baby foods, and they didn't have them. So it was all a little bit uncertain, and we were all alone here. We didn't know anybody. And so the first few weeks were a little bit difficult. But we settled down. We managed to find things to substitute the Pampers nappies. We found different baby food, and everything sort of settled into place. And because we were in a school community, we met people. We met other teachers, but we met parents as well. And because most of them were foreign, they were like us, they were in a similar situation. And that's what you find when you come to Mallorca. You find there are lots of people like you who've made that jump and moved to Mallorca. And they've all been through exactly the same difficulties that you've had. And they will tell you what you should do and where you should go. Anita very quickly found an English friend, and she'd got a little baby, similar sort of age, and they're still friends today. So Yvonne and Adolfo have been our friends since virtually day one of arriving in Mallorca. So I said I got a job. That makes moving to Mallorca a little bit easier, because Spain was not in the European Union, or the European Economic Community as it was then. UK was, and so it's a similar situation but reversed to what's happening now. So anyone who went to live in Mallorca in those days had to have a reason to go there, or had to have enough money to support themselves. And that's what it's gone to now. So if you want to come to Mallorca now, you've got to have a reason or a job, and you've got to have enough money to support yourself. So we arrived with very, very little money, but I had a job. And the fact that I'd got a job meant that I could get a work permit, and that meant I was going to be paying social security here, which got us sorted officially, if you like, here in Mallorca. In order to get the work permit and the residency, we had to have a certain amount of money in the bank, which I certainly didn't. So the school loaned me a large amount of cash, which I had to take to the bank, deposit, get a bank statement, and then withdraw and give back to the school. And that seemed to be the way that they did it in those days, just to prove that I'd got the cash and that I could apply for my residence and work permit. How it'll work now, I don't know, but I think you're going to have to prove that you've got enough money to survive if you haven't got a job here. And if you have got a job, make sure that you can actually survive on the money that you're going to get paid. Another thing I had to have was a medical. To work here, I had to go and see a doctor who gave me some sort of an examination, which was very, very brief, but I had to have a medical to show that I could work here. So all of this was settling in, and we took a few weeks to settle in, but it all started to sort itself out, and we gradually got used to living here in Mallorca. When it got to November, we were looking forward to Christmas, and there was a little draw, a big draw, to get us back to the UK. We wanted to go and see our family. And the local card shop, greetings card shop, organised a flight to London, Gatwick, I think it was. And it was the worst flight we've ever been on. The plane was absolutely crammed full. The seats were so close together, it was uncomfortable, but it was only 2 hours, I suppose. We landed in Gatwick. Anita's father came down from Stoke-on-Trent to pick us up, and in the awful weather we drove all the way back to Stoke, and we were with our family over the Christmas period. And that was lovely, but it was equally lovely to go back to Mallorca. And we had a week or 2 weeks in the UK, and then back to Mallorca for the Three Kings. And the Three Kings is something really special to celebrate here in Mallorca. One of our first purchases when we first got here was a radio, so that we could listen to the BBC World Service on the shortwave. We didn't have a television. We didn't have a telephone at the beginning, so any phone calls had to be made from a phone box. So the shortwave radio was really quite good to listen to the BBC World Service. There was a local radio station, Radio 103 or 98.4, or I can't remember what the number was, but that was a local English radio that really did keep us going for quite a while. So that's a little bit about how we ended up here in Mallorca, and how we settled down right up to our first Christmas. In future videos we can talk about all sorts of other things, about buying property, renting property, about the general costs of living. How much does it cost to live here? How much are groceries here? How much does it cost to run a car here? What's food like? What's it really like in the winter time here? Lots of questions, and hopefully in a future video I'll be able to give you some of those answers. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.